Hey, Sean Hannity here with a highlight from my radio show today, right here on iHeartRadio.
This is the Sean Hannity Show.
When we, the passengers, realized what was going on, we were like, well, why is this happening? He's not a problem. What is going on? And we were all kind of, raised our voices and said, this is a real problem. So the captain winds up coming out of the cockpit, and he basically asked us all to leave the aircraft.
These people, all of them, got on a bus and drove 3.5 hours from Philadelphia. They could have stayed on the plane, but they chose not to. I'm so humbled.
All right, an amazing story we told you about last week where a gentleman by the name of Albert Rizzi was kicked off a US Airways flight last Thursday out of the Philadelphia International Airport. They were headed to Long Island's MacArthur Airport and really treated unfairly. A flight attendant claimed that his guide dog was too restless to fly. Now, this is after the plane literally was sitting there on the tarmac for well over an hour. Then the passengers on the plane rallied behind Albert and his dog, and the flight attendant and flight captain forced everybody off the plane, canceled the flight. Then everyone got on this bus and drove home. And joining us now is Albert Rizzi and two of the passengers that joined him. Mary Elko Comfort and Kurt Budke is with us. Guys, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Hey, Albert, let me start with you. So you're on this flight. It's a pretty short flight from Philly to Long Island. And I guess the plane, like usual, is delayed, right? How long were you delayed for?
We were on the tarmac for about an hour and 43 minutes before they turned the plane around.
Okay, and you're on with your guide dog. You're legally blind, right?
I'm completely blind, Sean. I'm an overachiever. I can't see anything.
Okay, but
yes.
and there's a story behind that. You had a pretty dangerous strain of fungal meningitis. And in 2006, you woke up one day just totally blind, right?
Yeah, I was in the hospital for 2 months, and it was touch and go for about the last 3 weeks of 2005. And I woke up on the Epiphany, January 6th, completely blind, and started living my life to the fullest as a person who couldn't see anymore, at least not physically see.
Listen, I got to believe that's one of the hardest things for anybody to then go through.
Well, I have good breeding. My mother and my father raised me to not be a quitter, and they told me specifically in no pun in certain terms it really sucks to be me. But at this point, I need to rise to the challenge and be the best teacher, be the best uncle, the best son that I was raised to be, and just become the best blind person. And that's really as much as it took for me to realize that I was raised to be better than giving into the depressive side of what really could have been a choice that nobody would have blamed me to make.
What a great profile and courage. What a great example you are to your fellow human beings, because a lot of us whine over little things in life, me included. And you're telling us to basically have a better attitude about things, and I really admire you for that. Look, can I ask one question about this? Because I'm just fascinated, and I hope you don't mind me prying a little bit.
No.
Did you find, because now it's been, 7 years that you lost your sight completely. Did you find in that period of time that your other senses have sharpened, have gotten more keen? I'm just a curiosity question.
You know what? To a major degree, absolutely. Unfortunately, part of the nerve damage I suffered also impacted my sense of touch. I have neuropathy in my hands and feet, and I had learned Braille when I could see, oddly enough. So I can't really read Braille comfortably. My smell and sense of taste were compromised. But my sense of hearing and the sense of touch throughout the rest of my body, and oddly enough, the gray matter in my brain has become much more reactive and much stronger than ever before. And I do think that there's some truth to that about other senses being picked up. But and when you look at Lady Justice, Justice is blind. It just proves to you that sight compromises the truth as we see it. That every one of our other senses, when used without sight, really gives us a clear picture.
Wow, that's. I'm getting more interested in you and your story every second. All right, let me ask you. So you have a guide dog. What's your dog's name?
My dog's name is Doxology. It means the study of faith, and it is a praise to God and a beginning. It's a hymn they sing in a lot of Christian churches, and it was a hymn that was written back in the late 1600s by an Anglican bishop by the name of Thomas Ken. And oddly enough, he came with that name, which tells me that there was a divine presence guiding us together. And every time I walk with this dog, I'm walking in the light because dogs fell backwards with God. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was weird.
No, so here you are. You didn't let this set you back in your life.
No.
And you obviously are a faithful person, very inspired. And in spite of the difficulties and the injuries that you sustained and the 2 months. And so anyway, you're living your life. You're flying around.
I was actually flying back from San Francisco. I flew out to Silicon Valley to work with Intuit to make QuickBooks accessible to the blind for the very first time ever.
All right, so and you flew out there all by yourself with your guide dog?
Oh, yeah, I do. I actually think that was like the 6th or 7th flight I did this year. Yeah, no, it's
all right,
awesome.
Listen, I'm an expert traveler. The one thing I'm going to teach you about traveling, never change planes. You're better off always going one way and then driving the rest.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I got to revisit the idea of maybe driving into LaGuardia or Kennedy from now on, so I don't have to deal with those kinds of issues.
Yeah, it's worth the time. I'm telling you, I'm just an experienced traveler. All right, so then tell me, so you're there with Doxology, if I said that right.
Yeah,
you're there with your guide dog. You have to wait an hour and 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Is the dog bothering anybody? Is the dog getting restless? It wouldn't surprise me if it is.
If the dog was bothering anybody, it was bothering Mary, but that's not even close.
No.
The dog wasn't bothering anybody, Sean. He was laying down sleeping the entire time.
Yeah.
And Mary was kind enough to let us have some space under her seat because we didn't have a seat to as she said, stow the dog. And he was just, he just wanted to get close to me, so he would sneak out. And she came back about 3 times to, the third time was the end of it all for me, and I guess as far as my being on the plane. But she was just very unrealistic in her expectations that I was able to deliver what she wanted. And the dog never left my side. The dog was never off.
So what had happened? So the dog was supposed to be under the seat? What kind of dog is it?
He's a yellow Labrador Retriever, and as my niece told me when I first got him, he looks like a perfectly toasted marshmallow, and probably tips the scale about 82 pounds. He's a big boy.
All right, so the dog's 82 pounds, but it's the quintessential guide dog. All right, yes. Mary, you're sitting next to Albert on the plane?
Yes, I was sitting on his right-hand side, so we were right next to each other in the very back of the plane, the last row.
All right, so you're in the back of the plane, last row. Was the dog getting in anybody's way?
No, we got Doxy comfortably placed underneath my feet in my seat. I just kind of curled up on my seat to make foot room for him, and we kind of, I teased Albert that, Doxy's a little bit, plump, and we kind of tucked him in my space the best that we could, put this really large dog in a small place.
All right, and the dog was behaving. I have found that guide dogs are the best behaved dogs out there, and you're obviously being very nice, and he's not bothering you at all. Sounds like you're falling in love with the dog like everyone else normally would, right?
Oh, my God, I did. And all he did was want to curl up in a spot. He did what dogs do when they're tired. All they want to do is have a spot to lay down in.
Right.
And that's all he wanted was his spot.
All right, so then what happened from there?
Well, the flight attendant, every time he would sneak out to get closer to me and rest his head on my foot or his paw on my foot, she was very militant. She said, "You need to get that dog under the seat, otherwise this plane is not taking off."
Oh, good grief.
Kurt will back this up for you because I thought I had dreamt what she said, but I asked her at some point, I said, "Why are you being so evil?" And she said, "I'm not being evil. If I was evil, I would just turn this plane around without asking you to do this." Right, Kurt?
Yeah. So basically, in her last approach, really, before coming back, it was before returning back to the gate. Her statement was, "If I was an evil flight attendant, I would turn the plane back to the gate." And it was a little on the confrontational side. It was definitely a choice of words that it was not ideal for the situation.
Look, I think we've all experienced some of the nicest flight attendants in the world. But
absolutely.
And then you get the one that either is having a bad day.
Should retire.
Yeah, maybe should retire. Maybe, because you got to be a people person because you're serving people. And you know what? You're dealing with look, if you have Alec Baldwin on your plane, you're in trouble.
Well, Sean, I'm glad you're saying that because too many times I've heard people really vilify flight attendants. And I have had some very fantastic experiences. And a lot of the people I've come in contact with at US Airways in their their airway club in Philadelphia. I've sat with and enjoyed, and they see me so regularly that I know their names. There's Rod at the front desk, Franny the bartender, Barbara and Clara, who take me back and forth to the gate. And they're just some fantastic personalities. And there were some really great people in the terminal who were trying to diffuse this instead of escalate it like the pilot and the flight attendant would do. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would think. And by the way, Kurt, you were sitting on the other side of Albert, correct?
So I was diagonal from him. So I was one row in front, diagonal from him.
All right, so let's walk through. So she comes back, and she's getting a little obnoxious about the dog, is really staying under the seat, as I understand it.
Yeah. So from my point of view, I'm hearing all the talk about the dog because everybody's interested when you have a dog that's that well behaved, and just hearing Albert's story as you were hearing before. It's an inspirational story, and he was talking to Mary, and unfortunately I was eavesdropping a little bit.
So you're saying you're saying Albert was hitting on Mary. Go ahead, pick it up from there.
Have you seen Mary?
Not saying that.
We'll add that twist to it.
Yeah, I'm teasing. All right.
And it basically, she at the last pass she made, it became very confrontational, and I let her know. It seemed like you're raising your voice, and she said, "I'm not raising my voice." And I said, "Well, you're speaking in short staccato tones, which tells me you're aggravated, and I'm not going to engage you." And I really said to Sean, I said, "I am not going to engage you in anything that's going to escalate that'll give you the opportunity to throw me off the plane. So why don't we just get you to the front of the plane? Let's get off the ground, and when we get off the ground, I'll stuff the dog under the seat, and in 45 minutes, we'll be in New York, and this will be a distant memory. Now just go sit down and let's get going." That's when she decided to turn the plane around.
And her body language was very, very assertive towards him.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
Her hands up and was leaning down. I even found myself kind of pushing back because I couldn't understand why she was getting so assertive and aggressive towards him, knowing that he couldn't see to do what she wanted to do, and instead of just helping him, she was directing him and other passengers to do what she wanted him to do.
All right, so walk us through the point where they finally said, "All right, we're going to we got to get off the plane."
The guy gets on the plane. His name is Lamar, and this is the gentleman who really needs to be promoted and credited for calming me down. Walked me off the plane, and I have to be honest, Sean.
What did they say? You have to get off the plane?
It was kind of odd, and I got a sense that she pointed to me without acknowledging anything verbally. I got up. The gentleman had said, "Mr. Rizzi, let me help you off the plane." And I thought they were being, kind to the poor, blind guy. And I got my bags, and I heard the overhead compartment close. And as I'm walking a few steps, I realized I'm the only one standing up. I'm the only one getting my bag. And I stopped, and I said, "Am I the only one getting off this plane?" And Lamar said, "We'll talk about that inside." And that's when, unfortunately, I became a Brooklyn brat, and I dropped a few F-bombs, and I became very upset and very irate, and let him know what I thought about the flight attendant and what I thought about this circumstance.
Yeah, and Albert, that's also when the passengers, that's when we basically heard what was basically going on. As soon as we heard you ask that question, am I the only one getting off, and we heard the answer, that's when everybody started looking at each other like, is this really happening?
And that's when I spoke up and said, "Why are you taking him off the plane?" At that point, witnessing everything I saw firsthand, I had to speak up, and I said, "Why are you taking him off the plane?" And the flight attendant tried to say it was all Albert and Doxy.
We had, up until that point, when we turned around, I was under the impression, and obviously you can hear from Kurt and Mary's take, that we were all getting off the plane.
We were pretty close to that 2-hour time frame where you're kind of, I believe, procedurally forced to go back.
Yeah, the Bill of Rights requires the way they're going to have to buy us tickets for next year.
All right, I want to pick it up. I want to pick it up right there. I'm gonna, if you guys can stay just a couple of minutes more, I want you to finish the story. I don't want to rush through it. Albert Rizzi, him and his guide dog kicked off the plane. Then the passengers rebel. We're going to pick it up right at this point when we get back. And toll free, our telephone number. We'll get to your phone calls when we get back. 800-941-SEAN. If you want to be a part of the program, great Hannity tonight, 10 Eastern. On Fox that you don't want to miss. I'll tell you about that in a second.
Hannity Headline. A bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
All right, when we come back, we're going to get the rest of the story from Albert Rizzi and also two of the passengers on this flight, Mary Elko Comfort and Kurt Budke, are going to stay with us. We'll get to your phone calls on it as well. Toll-free, 800-941-SEAN is our number. Thanks, Scott Shannon. Toll-free, our telephone number is 800-941-SEAN. You want to be a part of this extravaganza. We continue. Albert Rizzi has been blind since the year 2006. He has a guide dog by the name of Doxy. He was on a flight from Philly to Long Island, and he got into this big huff, even though the dog was behaving. He got into this. Apparently, this flight attendant goes nuts. They're about to kick him off the plane. Also with us is two of the people that were there with him, and they join us as well. Mary Elko Comfort and Kurt Budke is with us. All right, so why don't we pick it up from, so all of a sudden you realize that they're kicking you off the plane. They didn't even tell you why. They just said they brought a guy in from, I guess, outside the plane. He comes in the plane, and he says, get your stuff?
Yeah, he wanted to help me with my stuff. So, I walk from the plane, the terminal, through, into the terminal, and I kind of call it the walk of shame. And, at that moment, I really have to be honest, Sean, the worst experience of my entire life, second to the day that I was told I would never see again.
Wow. All right, now from your standpoint, Mary and Kurt, what's going on from your standpoint? Kurt, you're sitting in front. You're sitting in the front and of Albert, and Mary, you're sitting right next to him, and you know the dog hasn't done anything wrong.
I witnessed the dog's behavior 100%. I saw how Albert and I were containing the dog. I saw how I was containing the dog because I think the flight attendant kept forgetting that he couldn't see the interior of the plane. She kept telling him to put it under a seat when he couldn't even see that there was a seat. It was almost getting ludicrous. So we were all trying to do what I basically kept thinking it was her job to do. So
you see that the flight attendant is escalating. So
I was trying to do anything I could. I kept telling her, this is fine, we got this. I got the dog, we're going to take care of this. And I just kept like, Doxy, come on, baby, let's get under the seat, holding the dog with my legs. But honestly, all he wanted to do was rest his head on Albert's feet. He was not even trying to
So what's the big deal? It's not like it's out in the aisle. What's the big deal if the dog rests his...
And that's exactly what she kept intimating, is that the dog was in the aisle. The dog wasn't in the aisle. His head was on my foot. My foot was sitting in a spot where your foot would normally be. So neither myself nor the dog were blocking anybody's egress or caused a safety concern. In my
and the dog isn't barking, isn't carrying on, isn't going in the aisle. It's not bothering. And Mary loves the dog. What's the problem here? I'm trying to understand this.
Well, Kurt, why don't you tell them what happened is I'm gonna tell you what was going on inside. But normally I tell what happened on the inside of the plane last. I'd like Kurt and Mary to say what was going on while I'm inside.
All right, Kurt, what's going on from your perspective at this point when it's now escalating and they're beginning to ask?
And I'm not on the plane.
And they're beginning to ask.
As they were asking, Albert to get off the plane, and once we heard him say, basically, am I the only one getting off this plane? That's when it really started to hit home to us that what was happening. And I'll let Mary talk about what she was saying vocally, because she started speaking to the flight attendant and sort of many other passengers. Me, I turned to Mary because she had gotten Albert's business card, and I was basically trying to contact Albert as he was getting off the plane to see what we could do as far as giving him a ride home.
We were already working on that, how we were going to get Albert home.
Oh my God! And I got the phone call. I was at the desk, and I get this phone call, and I heard him say, "Hey, this is Kurt. I'm going to get off the plane. I want to figure out how to get you home." And I'm thinking it was somebody calling me from MacArthur in Islip. I'm like, "No, I'm not off the plane yet. I'm still in Philadelphia." And he goes, "No, this is Kurt. I was sitting in front of you." And I'm like, "Wow."
So what's going on with the other passengers, Mary and Kurt? What's happening with them?
Well, I spoke up saying, why are you taking him off the plane? And she was telling us how he was disruptive and the dog wasn't behaving. And then the flight attendant ran the cockpit. And I saw all the other passengers at this point on their phone, Twitter. I was actually even contacting my fiance, telling him I can't believe what was going on. What should I do?
I even got an email from somebody named Chris. There was a guy on the flight who happened to have a brother who was blind, and he really took it personal. He really got upset and was only protecting me, but his brother.
All right, so they take you off the plane.
Right.
But let's stay in the plane for a minute. Kurt, what's happening once he's off the plane?
So basically, once he got off, basically the passengers just started making it clear to the flight attendant that this is not right. Albert really needs to get back on this plane. We need Albert back in this plane, or really, it's not going anywhere. And that's when also the pilot came out as well, and basically started to explain that there's a safety situation, and there is, because we didn't want to fly without Albert being on the plane. So the call came in that basically the flight was going to have to be canceled, because we could not settle down without Albert being on the plane.
So everybody stood in
that we wanted Albert and Doxy put back on the plane.
Yep.
And the pilot at one point said, this flight is going to Long Island. You can either stay on the plane and go to Long Island, or you can simply get off the plane. And I do admit at that point I had that panic moment, but we have to speak up and defend him. So I figured, well, if I'm the next one kicked off the plane, then so be it. And I think most of the passengers started to feel that same way. And, the flight attendant apparently felt threatened by us, and we were simply all saying, we want to go to Long Island. Let's just get to Long Island, put Albert and Doxy back on the plane. And passengers were saying, put the man and his dog back on the plane, and we'll get going.
And so then you all got thrown off the plane.
They said, well, we're canceling this flight, and then you all need to get off the plane. So we told her the flight was canceled. But, yeah, we were thrown off the plane.
All right, so you're thrown off the plane. Then what did you do? Then you all got a bus?
Here's the thing, son. I was inside having a dialogue with Lamar and Linda. And at some point, Lamar says to me, Mr. Rizzi, I need you to stop yelling at me. I think I understand what you're saying. And I could just hear the expression on his colleague's face, oddly enough. And she said, what do you mean? And Lamar said, when I walked onto that plane, it wasn't what I expected. I guess the way this woman described what was going on is he expected to see me up, arguing in a very confrontational, attacking position or state. He expected to see my dog off-leash, running up and down the aisle. And he told his colleague, Mr. Rizzi was sitting there next to the other passengers. Everybody was pretty content, especially given the fact that they were an hour and 43 minutes delayed. Nobody seemed to be yelling at me, but why aren't we leaving yet? The dog was asleep. And he said, Linda, to make matters even more confusing for me, there were at least 7 seats that were empty that this woman could have just moved one person, and the dog and Mr. Rizzi could have had their own row. And Linda goes, you mean that dog could have had his own seat? And the guy said, yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, that's when I let him know I self-identified as a traveler with a guide dog. Most blind people don't like to do that. They feel it's a violation of HIPAA law. I like to do that to make it comfortable for my dog, for me, and my fellow passengers.
This is one of these cases where, and again, I don't want to, because I've met so many nice flight attendants. I agree. I don't want to use a broad, sweeping generalization here, but you can always get that one person that is obnoxious. And look at how this thing didn't need to be handled this way. The dog wasn't bugging anybody. All right, so where does this end now? Well, so you all get on a bus and you head on a bus home?
Well, no, it started. I was sitting there, like I said, feeling the worst I've ever felt in my life. And then the door opened, and I heard Lamar goes, oh, my God. And I'm thinking, what now? Am I going to be arrested? And everybody piled into the terminal. And everybody was, we're not leaving without you. We're not. And I'm telling you, Sean, that was the most empowering and humbling moment in my life. It really minimized everything that I was feeling. I felt marginalized. I felt and I felt like a useless piece of garbage because of the way I was being treated. And in that moment, those 43 minutes that I stood there arguing with Lamar and Linda about how I was going to get home, let me know clearly why God chose me to be blind, because I wasn't going to take this laying down. And when that much humanity in that concentrated plane, in that concentrated area, swept over me, I was lifted up like I'd never been lifted up before. And, when Mary said how, I was hesitant, I wasn't going to get off the plane, we all need to follow Mary's lead and Pat's lead and Kurt's lead and Jim and Chris and Bob, and I can go on. everybody made a point of introducing themselves to me. We need to take this moment and move it and pay it forward. Everybody needs to do something when they see something that isn't right instead of being observers on a bench doing nothing.
Right.
Yeah, because, first of all, this is one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. And, by the way, I got to give a lot of credit, and Mary and Kurt and everybody that's on that flight. How cool is that you guys stood up for somebody that was an innocent victim here? Because I know when I travel, I'm like, get this thing up in the air. Let's go. And the inconvenience of saying, all right, I'm going to stand in solidarity with somebody, that means your whole day's ruined. But you did it because it was the right thing to do. I mean, I love the fact that you all did that. That's such a great story.
It was heartbreaking when Albert stood there and you saw how isolated he was and said, am I the only one getting off the plane? I don't know how any human being could hear that, see that. And again, yes, we all wanted to get somewhere, had to be somewhere. But at that moment, your heart had to break that you had to. Was it reactive? Yes. But it was reactive from, what if someday we're in that same moment of isolation and helplessness?
Yeah. And it was to your point about, there was a couple on the plane that had been, Barbara, and I think his name is Warren. I apologize if I've gotten that wrong. But they had traveled 24 hours from Europe on a cruise. And the sounds of them, they were probably in their 70s. The last thing they probably wanted to do was get on a bus for 4 more hours after traveling 24 hours. It was just a remarkable expression of humanity.
How did you get the bus?
The airport got a bus for us because when we started figuring on how we were all going to get home, there were only 4 flights available the next day over 3 different time slots that ranged from 10 o'clock till 7. So, at first Kurt had rented a car and was going to drive me and Mary. And then when I heard everybody was taking the bus, I looked at him and I said, brother, I cannot go with you and leave these people on a bus. I'm sorry. I said, I understand if you want to go home. You've got family at home. You've got 3 children. Everybody had to do something. He had to be at work the next day. And Mary said to him, no, you got to come with us.
Listen, if I don't get to some of these phone calls, you guys stay right on the line there. Tina in Cincinnati, say hi to Albert and Mary and Kurt. Hi.
You guys are my heroes.
Thank you,
I called in for something totally different, and I'm so touched. I'm so grateful.
I mean, my whole staff is crying. Linda, who has a heart that's a stone, is crying inside the other room there.
It's a beautiful thing, Tina. Thank you for your feeling and your empathy. And that's the thing I think that most of those people had on the plane, and it seems like you do too, Tina. Empathy is something that we need to have for our fellow man. And again, not you have to be Jewish or Muslim or Christian to believe in one thing. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you is a very simple motto to live by.
All right, Tina, thanks for hanging in there. God bless
Tina.
you. And Linda, I've never seen you cry before. Ever.
This story is killing me. It takes a lot to make me cry.
All right, hang on. Terry in Fayetteville, Arkansas is going to weigh in. Terry, how are you? You're on with Kurt and Mary and Albert. Hi.
Oh, gosh, it's so inspiring. My 3 dogs are sitting here looking at me. I'm on the verge of tears as a dog lover, as a rescue volunteer. I just want to give major props to Robert and Doxy, but especially the passengers on that plane. I would hope that if I was in that situation, I would stand up, and that's the power of doing what's right. And I just find it so inspiring, and God bless you all. And
thank you.
And in relation to the flight attendant, yeah, we all have bad days, but gosh, I hope she gets what's coming to her. There are consequences for our actions, and I guess we'll find out what her consequences are, because it just gets to the point sometimes we can't have people in jobs where they're just uncaring individuals,
good point.
Especially in a situation like that.
Let me ask one last question. Are you going to have any follow-up, Albert?
Follow-up? Well, it's kind of funny. I was speaking to a gentleman today from Pittsburgh that Mary put me in touch with. When you say follow-up, I'm sure it's not the same thing that I'm about to tell you, but my follow-up will be getting together with all of the people that were on that flight and having a dinner to be in communion with them, because we had that stolen from us. Mary and I were, and this is one of the things I want to thank you for, is your support of the veterans and your support of the Guide Dog Foundation. You're an ardent supporter of the school that Doxy comes from. And Mary and I were talking about work we wanted to do for the veterans with the QuickBooks project. I want to open up doors for the Wounded Warriors, and Mary's working with them to help our warriors with PTSD in yoga.
Wow.
And giving them a center. And we had that moment taken from us. So I need to have that be my follow-up. I need to pick up where I left off on that
So,
flight.
in other words, not a lawsuit. You just want to get together with this great group of people.
You know what? I think education and mitigation must be the first route we take. The lawyers are the only ones who really get what they need out of something as litigious as this. But, I need to be very contemplative and discerning about what I do, because I have an opportunity here to really shift perspectives and quote-unquote regulations and policies that some flight attendants perceive as the only way a disabled person should fly.
Well, listen, I don't mean to cut you off, Albert, but it's the American Vet Dogs. We did a remote in Huntington at the Huntington Country Club just a while back. Listen, I've got to run. What an inspiring story.
Much,
Albert, God bless you. Kurt, you're amazing.
You too,
Mary, you're an amazing person, too. And give the dog a hug from Uncle Sean here, because I love dogs. I got two of them running around my house, Duffy and Gracie, right now.
You tell Linda I said thank you for making this happen, because she's a driving force. She's got a beautiful presence.
I'm going to put you guys on TV, so stay on the line. We're going to get your numbers. We're going to work that out. This is too touching a story. It's amazing. What a great group of people. It's sort of... it just makes you feel good about humanity. In the worst of circumstances, it sometimes brings out the best in people, which is amazing.
For more of the Sean Hannity Show, go to Hannity.com.